Notre Dame fans, welcome back to another edition of the Irish Breakdown Podcast. It is Wednesday, April 28th, Vince, and it feels like just yesterday spring ball was starting. And now we're 3 days away from spring ball ending, and that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about the Notre Dame Blue-Gold Game today. We're going to preview just some overall things that we're looking for, some interesting topics, and just dive into the offense, then the defense. Vince has 2 pages worth of notes for today's
little pages,
show.
But they are note filled.
So you got a couple Lincoln Riley plague sheets there,
That's right.
ready to go. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. You know, this is an interesting one, Vince, because to me, normally I still don't put a whole lot in blue gold games from an outcome standpoint. I think that no one should care about what so-and-so's completion percentage was or, you know, what the score is. It's more about just seeing how this program is developing up to this point in the process of getting ready for the season. But I think there's more this year that I'm intrigued by than most years. Most years it's just like, it's going to be a fun game. But there's actually, because of some of the changes on offense that we hope to see, because of the new coordinator, because of some of the transfer situations and position battles, there's just a lot more intrigue for this game. And maybe that's also partly because we didn't get one last year. And I'm feeling super deprived that we didn't have that. And so now I'm even more so looking forward to this. But there's a lot more. Well, for me, Vince, and you tell me if you agree, there's a lot more intrigue for me. There's a lot more that I'm like, man, I'm really curious to see how this goes, where normally I'm just like, whatever, it's a blue gold game, it'll be fun.
Well, I think a lot of that has to do with the fact we haven't been able to see practice, too. A lot of times we're going into the blue gold game, we have a lot of our questions answered. Like, we kind of know what to expect. We know, who's been rotating with who and things of that nature. Like, we have a really good idea of what we're going to see in the blue gold game. Now, we've got an inkling, like we think we know some stuff, and will all those questions be answered in the blue gold game? No, of course they won't. But I think we're going to get closer to those answers by watching the blue gold game. And like I said, since we didn't have practice to watch, the blue gold game means a little bit more. You're going to be able to see some stuff in person that we haven't been able to see. There's a little bit more riding on it this year. And you're right, there wasn't one last year. There wasn't a spring last year. And this is kind of a unique year because of all the position battles that are taking place. The offensive line, quarterback, wide receiver, obviously more so on the offensive side, but there's still a lot of intrigue on the defensive side because of Marcus Freeman, the cornerback, all of that stuff. There's a lot more questions out there about this particular 2021 Notre Dame team that we haven't seen the last few years, right? I mean, there hasn't been this many position battles. There hasn't been, a new coordinator in a little bit. Obviously Tommy Rees was new, but we kind of knew where that was going.
To your point, though, Vince, with Rees and Lee, those guys were promotions from within.
Correct.
It wasn't an outside. And we haven't really seen that since post-2016.
Yeah, and I feel like this is kind of like Tommy Rees's first season, because I also feel like we're going to see some things from him, not necessarily in the blue gold game. I get all that. But I think we're going to see some of his personality coming out into the offense more this year than last year, right? I hope so too. I'm cautiously optimistic. Let's put it that way. So
my concern about this game, Vince, and this is from a fan perspective, from an analyst perspective, my big concern is because we haven't seen any not any real practice. We've seen these like little highlight clips. I've seen so much overreaction to those little clips.
Oh, it's ridiculous.
People say, well, this guy should be the starting quarterback because of what we've seen in these little 3-minute clips. And my concern is that there's going to be a much more overreacting to the gold game than normal. There's normally a lot of overreacting to a spring game when we've been at 8 practices and we can tell people, okay, that's not what you saw. Okay, what we saw in these other 8 practices was this kid did really well. I don't care that he did.
We don't have that.
Game, right? Because it's always interesting because it's like there's always going to be a negative on every play. And what I mean by that is if a receiver goes out there and scores 3 long touchdowns, it's like, well, yeah, that was good, but man,
he was against Notre Dame's corner,
right? Or the defensive line, man, they had a bunch of sacks and they dominated the run game. Yeah, but it's the offensive line's not any good, and that's kind of the concern that's one of the negatives of watching a spring game and evaluating the spring game. And I'm more concerned about that this year because we had so little access to where Notre Dame kind of drove the storyline. They could put whatever clips in there that they wanted. and there wasn't any independent analysis and observations of what we saw, and that's a concern of mine.
And let me tell you, in this day and age of huddle film and things of that nature, you can look really, really good in a highlight montage, right? And it doesn't necessarily say what the truth is the best way to put it. That's why coaches want to watch full game film. They don't want to watch the highlight film that's on huddle. Yeah, that might get their attention.
You watch it, but it's a part of a bigger evaluation
That's exactly
process.
Right. And so Notre Dame, and I don't know how, who has say in what goes out and, all of those different things from a video standpoint. I don't know where the buck stops, if you will.
Yeah, I doubt Brian Kelly's like looking over the videographer's shoulder saying, oh, no, we don't show that. Yeah, okay, put that one in there.
But there's definitely some pick and choose. I mean,
there's some direction. There's some direction.
Absolutely.
Look, here's what we want. Let's get this in there.
There's a reason we're not getting like the all 22 look. You know what I mean? So like
we're getting that super zoomed in. Yeah.
It's like the NFL.
I still haven't seen a single wide receiver alignment this whole spring. We see them like after the catch, but we don't see anything else about receivers. Occasionally we get like a half of Braden Lindsey like flashing across the screen because it's right in front of the camera person. Yeah. Here's another thing that's interesting, Vince. We're going to talk about position battles on offense and defense, but here's the other big picture observation I have. There's a chance that this could be the most irrelevant position battle year ever because we're moving into a different era of college football, and a lot of other college football is already gone here. Notre Dame has not offensively, but defensively, Clark Lee started using a lot more players last year. And he's always done in the offensive line, but he started doing it even more in the secondary last year. They play 4 safeties a game. They played 3 corners a game. They played 5 linebackers a game.
Right.
Offensively, if what we think is going to happen happens, it doesn't necessarily matter as much who the number 1 or number 2 receivers. In the past years, it did matter because if you're the starting W, you were going to get 85 to 90% of the snaps. If you were the starting X, you're going to get 85 to 90% of the snaps. So now it's kind of like with the exception of every position except maybe offensive line. It's kind of like, well, it doesn't really matter anymore who's going to start because they're both going to play kind of thing. And I think that to me adds a little bit of an intrigue. Okay, so this guy's a starter, but how is this guy going to be used is now sort of the conversation. So if Shane Simon starts at will linebacker, that's fine. But, okay, how are they going to use Maris Luafau because he's still going to play? And those are the things that I'm interested in. So
yeah, I get that.
It's going to be interesting. It's going to be interesting.
It is going to be a situation where I'm more, I don't know if excited is the right word, but I'm definitely more intrigued to watch this blue gold game than I have in the past few years, right? I missed it last year, obviously. I was missing everything at this point last year.
We still saw more practices last year than we saw this year.
That's a really good point. Well, that's really sad too, but that's funny. But I will be and I won't see it live. I'll full disclosure. I've got a doubleheader on Saturday, so I won't see it live.
You couldn't have gone anyway because you
can only send one of us. So I'm gonna have to watch it, on the replay or whatever, which is no big deal because that's how I'd be watching it anyway. But I'm very intrigued to go home and sit down and just watch the game and see who's who. And we're gonna get into that obviously on what we're gonna be watching for and all that, which I'm really excited about.
And so before we dive into it, so the way it'll work is Saturday after I get done writing stuff at the stadium, I will come home and do a sort of a recap podcast.
Right. Cool.
You and I will then do one again on Monday.
Yes.
Where we get a lot of your thoughts. Cool. So just because of the doubleheader. So I just want people to understand that's why Vince most likely won't be on the podcast on Saturday after the game because he's going to have a couple things to worry about.
It is what it is. Trying to get some W's.
So let's, Vince, talk about the Notre Dame offense. As we head into this blue game session, I think this is the side of the ball that, for me, provides the most discussion, uncertainty, intrigue, all those things wrapped into one, positives and negatives. This is the side of the ball, to me, that is going to determine whether or not Notre Dame is not just a playoff contender again, but a national championship contender. When the offense catches up to the defense, that is when Notre Dame will be a title contender.
I agree. And you make a case where there's a position battle going on at every single position except for running back. But at the same time, we're still going to be watching running back to see how that's evolved, right? So, even
tight end, I should take that back, Vince. I said there's not a position battle at tight end, but that's true for the starting starting tight end,
but not that's right. Because I was going to say tight end too, but then everybody behind Michael Mayer is battling for time. So every position.
So here's the other interesting thing about it is there's so much uncertainty because of what we have and haven't seen. There's so much uncertainty about what this offense is going to look like. We did a show yesterday where we kind of broke down some comments, and that's where we're at this spring. We have to parse comments made by coaches in order to have content. But it was a very enlightening and encouraging press conference from Tommy Rees because it just felt genuine. Maybe it's just a bunch of BS, but I don't think so. I thought it was real genuine. Part of me thinks he's too young to be a BSer. Like he's just like, look, I'm just going to tell you how I feel, and this is what I see, and this is what we're going to do.
It felt very two guys sitting at the bar chatting about football.
Yeah.
To me, you know what I mean? Without giving away state secrets. Like I felt like he was like,
and he said that. He's like, I'm not going to dive more into the red zone package because there's some schematic stuff we're going to do that I'm not going to give you, which
of course.
Makes total sense. So, so what we're going to do is we're going to line up in a 3-by-1 package. All right. So, Florida State, turn your radio off. Or you should hear that.
Don't listen.
Right. So there's just a lot that we can take away from this blue gold game, Vince. So, I want to ask you first. We're going to go over sort of, things we're looking for in the game, sort of big picture things that we're looking for. 3 players that were, veteran returning players or older players, if it's a newcomer, but still an older player. 3 players we're most looking forward to seeing. The position battles we have our eye on, and then, some freshmen that we're looking for. And then we're going to sort of project of what we hope are the ideal takeaways, what we hope we're talking about after the game, coming out of the game. So, Vince, let's kick things off with, the 3 things that we're looking for from the offense from a big picture standpoint. I'm going to let you kick off with the first thing that you're hoping to see.
Well, the first one is, the buzzword, right? RPOs. Like we've seen them in the video clips. It's clear as day what we're seeing in the video clips. Now, I want to see how those are being incorporated into the offense. Is it one a game? Is it part of the offense, right? I think it will be. I do, but it's something I need to see. And again, you're only going to be able to see so much, but that's something that you need to rep. And you need live reps doing RPOs. I mean, obviously it starts in drill work and all of that, but to get good at those, you need live reps. And there's no better live rep defense to go up against than Notre Dame's, right? So I want to see where they're going to be at with the RPOs and how it's integrated into the offense. I think you're going to get a good idea of what they're thinking with the RPO system in the offense.
And I would encourage people as you're trying to understand how much RPOs are going to be a part of what Notre Dame does is watch what the receivers are doing when they run the football. So if you see a handoff and you see the receivers running downfield blocking, it's not an RPO.
Right.
If you see a handoff and you see Avery Davis looking at the quarterback trying to catch the football, thinking be ready to catch football, or and then 2 other guys are blocking, that tells me they're running the screen. That if they got the right read, they're going to dump the ball outside. So those are things. If you want to know the difference between how do you know if it's an RPO? RPOs aren't just ran when it's a throw.
Right.
They're a part of what you do. If they throw the ball 5 or 6 times, and that's the only times we saw receivers, on those concepts really running routes, and it tells me it's just a wrinkle. It's not really a part of who they're going to be, and that's what I'm curious to see. And I'm also the thing for me, Vince, to go along with yours is, are we going to see some tempo?
Right.
Again, I'm not looking. Yeah.
I almost wrote that down, but I was like, I don't know if they're going to do it in the
Plus,
blue gold.
You knew that I was going to bring it up, I think. But see, I think they need to show it a little bit. Again, I don't want to see Notre Dame going 1,000,000 miles an hour.
Sure.
I don't really care about whether or not they look like Oregon in 2010. I've never advocated for that. I'll never advocate for that unless it's a 2-minute drill, right? But I do want to see them push the tempo more than what we saw. I don't want to see the ball consistently getting snapped with 12 or less seconds on the play clock. Right. I want to see them moving. That's what I want to see them doing. It is going to be a big thing for me. What's the next thing that you have?
So the next thing, and this is kind of an overall look, but I put QB in control. Like whoever happens to be the quarterback with the first team, and I think Drew Pine and Jack Cohn are both going to get reps with the first group. Are they in control of the offense? You know what I mean? Like, look, Ian Book was always in control of the offense. He led that group. There's no question about it. Now, these guys are both new. Jack Cohn's been here for what, 3 months, right? 3-4 months. Like, I want to see if the quarterbacks are in control of the offense, right? So that's one thing I'm going to be keeping an eye on.
For me, I want to see them spreading the ball around, and it kind of plays a little bit into your first thought about the RPOs because that'll be part of it. I don't necessarily want to see one guy catching 9 balls. I don't want to see Michael Mayer in the spring game catch 9 balls for 120 yards because we know he's a beast, right? I want to see like 9 different guys catch at least 2 or 3 passes, and just because to me, it's not so much that it says anything about the receivers as much as it says a lot about what type of offense they're going to be utilizing. If they're spreading the ball around, it tells me that it's more of a schematic emphasis with an improved, an enhanced schematic emphasis as opposed to, we're going to pound the ball to the W because that's what our offense does, or we're going to pound the ball to the tight end. It's more about taking what the offense gives you, and I think that's something that this offense needs is a little bit more balance, spreading the ball around. And it also means that obviously a lot of guys are playing and getting their opportunities.
Yeah, no question.
What's your third one?
I agree. I like that one, by the way. I put offensive line, and it's a very broad and generalistic, I guess, thing to write down. But there's a lot of questions about the offensive line, and I want to see if anybody's going to kind of take hold of a position, if anybody's going to, impress me in a spot that I haven't seen them in, right? And that's pretty much across the board, right? So I just put O-line because I'm going to be watching what they're doing the entire time, and that's the best thing about watching. Since I get to watch it after the fact, I can go back and I can watch the skill guys, and then I can go back and I can watch the offensive line. So offensive line is going to be on the top of my list to keep an eye on.
For me, I want to see how they use their personnel packages. How much diversity do we see from 11 personnel, 12 personnel, 20 personnel, 21 personnel? Does Notre Dame take the stance that, hey, we did certain things in practice, but we're not going to show those in games?
Sure.
Or do they just say, hey, we're going to give you hey, Florida State, good luck spending all summer trying to figure out what we're going to line up in. So, if I had to predict, I would predict that they are going to be a little bit more conservative with those personnel packages, but I'm still going to be looking for it to see if we do it. I don't think if we don't see it in the spring game that it doesn't mean, okay, well, they didn't use 2 running backs together. That means they're not going to do it. I don't think it necessarily means that.
I don't think so either.
We also know how Brian Kelly is. He doesn't like to show some of that stuff. And I think that's partly why we're getting the zoomed in.
Exactly. That I think was a directive from the head coach.
Yeah.
I absolutely think that. Yes.
So we may not see it, but I will be looking for it just to see if it happens. I'm not going to criticize them if we don't see it because of what we just said, but I wouldn't mind, if we did see it. So those are sort of the big picture things. Was there anything else that was kind of like almost made your list that you felt was?
Well, the tempo one was the tempo one was the one that almost made my list because I was like, well, I'd love to see it because I think that could be a real benefit to this offense, but I didn't know if they wanted to show it. So that's why I kept it off the list, but that is one of the things I'll be looking for too.
So let's get into specific players, Vince.
All right.
Who are the 3 players? And we'll start with your number 1. The players that you're on offense that you're most looking forward to seeing. And it can be because we haven't seen anyone. It can be a veteran who you want to see if his game is taken to the next level. There's all kinds of different things. So let's kick off with your number 1, Vince.
Well, I went with the softball for number 1, and that's Jack Cohn. I mean, I want to see him with the offense. I want to see him in a gold helmet. I've watched him at Wisconsin. I've seen him in the 3-minute clips, but I want to see him in control of this Notre Dame offense, and I want to see him with his teammates, and I'd love to see them, unleash it a little bit, let him, it kind of goes back to your spreading the ball around, right? I want to see him, get the ball to the outside. I want to see him stretch the field a little bit. I want to see him make every throw. So, like I said, it's kind of a softball one, but I want to see Jack Cohn.
I went with Jack Cohn and Drew Pine. I kind of cheated and put him in.
That's fair. I've got Drew Pine later. So
yeah, because I just felt like, to me, I've said all along, I'm actually pretty confident at quarterback, and I don't really care who starts. I'm not in the whole Team Cohn, Team Pine, Team Buckner discussion. Look, they got really good quarterbacks.
I agree.
Whoever wins the job as long as they start the guy that genuinely won the job, not a guy who's the veteran or the returner or whatever other criteria that could go into the conversation other than who's the best guy to lead this team to hopefully a championship opportunity this year, then I don't care. I'm confident in all those guys, but now it's kind of put up or shut up time, right? Like, I'm confident in them, but now we need to see them play well. And it goes back to what you talked about in your big picture thing is how do they control the offense? How do they manage the offense? How do they react after mistakes? Especially Pine, because I think with Cone, we've seen him in those. We've seen
he's
him
been in big
State twice.
situations.
We saw him win a road game against a top 10 team, something we haven't seen Notre Dame do in quite a long time.
Yeah,
we saw him in the Big Ten championship game. We saw him in the Rose Bowl. We kind of know how he's going to handle the moments. With him, it's more about how does he adjust to his teammates? How quickly has he kind of gotten on the same page? Does he work through the offense quickly? Does he process things efficiently? I don't care so much about his accuracy or the things that I've seen on film already from him. It's more about how's he fitting in with the offense. And then with Drew Pine, it's more about I want to see Drew let it rip, right? And I talked about this on the radio show last night, Vince. With Drew Pine, I know he's accurate. I know he's got a quick release. I know he can run the offense. I want to see him get out there and be aggressive. I want to see him get out there and say, hey, for all you people that think I'm too small or don't have a good enough arm, watch me bang this post route on the second play.
Absolutely.
Right? Watch me hit this back shoulder. Watch me fit this ball over the middle. I want to see him come out and sort of say, hey, I'm the redshirt freshman. He's the guy that's got 10 wins under his belt. He's the guy that's played in the Rose Bowl. He's the guy that's led the team to a Big Ten championship. He's the guy that most people are assuming is going to be starting job. So what do I have to lose? Right?
Yeah,
go out here and let it rip, have some fun, and be aggressive. That's what I want to see from Drew Pine in this game.
I agree. He should be playing loose and just going out there and just having at it because he's got literally nothing to lose. Mm-hmm. I love that.
Who's your number 2 guy?
I had Tosh Baker. He seems to be how do I want to say? He's not getting the headlines because of the other 2 freshmen, right? I mean, he's a redshirt freshman, so he's a sophomore technically. But he's kind of getting lost in the shuffle. But he's out there an awful lot, I believe, at right tackle. So I want to see what he brings to the table because he has an opportunity still, obviously, to start. I don't know if I don't know what their plan is, obviously, with the offensive line. If they're they're going to stick Jared Patterson on the right side and Tosh Baker is just a placeholder, right now, we don't know. And I hope that's not the case, but I want to see him go out there and just turn some heads and remind the coaching staff how good he is and how
don't
good
forget about me just yet. Yeah.
Exactly. Yes.
So right now, from what I'm told, the projected offensive line is going to be Blake Fisher at left tackle, Rocco Spindler at left guard, Zeke Curl at center, Jarrett Patterson at right guard, and Josh Lugger right tackle.
Wow.
Yeah. That's what I'm told they're gonna start fall camp off with. Now, here's the thing, though.
That's okay.
A guy like Tosh Baker, guys like Andrew Kristofic, those are guys that this spring opportunity could be that thing that sends them into the offseason saying, hey, okay, here's what I got to work on. Here's what I struggle with.
Sure.
And then they take it. Just because that's how the spring ends with what their plans are doesn't mean that guys aren't going to get opportunities when we get into fall camp. So there's obviously some talent in that group, but there's also some experiential concerns with that. My number 2, Vince, is Lawrence Keys III.
Ooh, nice.
I'm really excited to see what Lawrence Keys can do because I think that if they make the schematic changes that you and I are talking about, that you and I are hoping that they make, he's going to be one of the biggest beneficiaries because he's a little bit of a unique player in that he is athletic enough to do things after the catch. But what often gets lost about Lawrence is he's a really good route runner. Like he's a really sharp, precise route runner that can make plays down the field as well. And honestly, when we've seen him in the spring making plays, it's been down the field.
Sure.
He's a guy that to me was one of the guys that I didn't think got the opportunity he should have last year. He fumbled at those punts, and then he kind of just got put in the back of the line.
Yep.
I didn't like that decision. And I love the fact that instead of saying, I'm in my feelings and you screwed me over, which he would have been justified in saying, I'm going to transfer somewhere else and play.
He could have easily transferred. Sure.
He said, okay, you want to, all right, let me show you what I got. Let me, he came in hungry this spring, and that tells me a lot about Lawrence as a player. But even beyond that, he's talented. He really is. He's one of the guys I look at and say, you want to question the talent at receiver? Go back and watch what Lawrence did at the beginning of 2019 when he got an opportunity. Did he look scared of the moment? Was he worried about the Georgia secondary when he was making plays against Georgia when they got the opportunities, when he did it against Louisville on the road, those type of things? This kid can play, and I'm really looking forward to seeing how he performs in this Blue-Gold game.
Okay. I like it.
What's your 3?
Well,
What's your third?
I went with a veteran here as well. I went with Kyron Williams. And the reason being is because we've heard a lot about how they're going to move him around, and they're going to, utilize his ability out of the backfield, line him up as a slot receiver, all these different things. I want to see how much they're going to, show that in this game. I'm going to be keeping my eye out on where 23 is going to be, because he could be a difference maker in this offense, because he's one of those guys. He's got the talent, he's got the skill set to where a defensive coordinator is going to need to know where 23 is at all times, because it changes the dynamic of the offense, and you're going to have to know where he's at, because if he is lining up as a slot receiver, that means probably number 25 is in the backfield. Yeah. There's a lot of speed back there, right?
Yeah.
And you're going to have to keep an eye on what Kyren Williams can do catching the ball. You don't want a linebacker lined up over him. You know what I mean? So just all the different
things.
That
teams decide to put linebackers in coverage.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. So that's
please put a linebacker against Kyren Williams.
That's what I'm saying.
Reese has to be saying, like, oh God, please let this defensive coordinator put a linebacker on Kyren.
Right.
I have Kyren as my number 3, Vince, for those reasons plus a different reason. Kyron's a very confident kid. I want to find out if his experience and confidence is going to result in him trying to do more. Yeah. Or is it going to result in him becoming a more efficient player? That's something I'm very curious about. And I hope it's the second one. We got a quick question here from John. John, thank you so much for the super chat. But here's John's question, and I think this is kind of relevant to what we were just talking about.
Sure, absolutely.
And we also heard a question from Joe, Stukenborg, who's a new listener. But do you still feel Notre Dame will field a top 10 to 15 offensive line this fall? In 2021 is the defensive line now the strength of the football team? We'll hit on that second part later, John. But the first part, Vince, is interesting because the answer is twofold. Number one, should they? Yes. Will they? I'm concerned. And
sure.
And when I talk about the concern about Blake Fisher and Rocco Spindler, it is not about them as talented players.
Correct.
I had Blake Fisher as the number 1 recruit in the class, right? I had him as a borderline 5-star player. I had Rocco Spindler as a top 100 recruit with a 5-star upside. I'm not at all concerned about their talent. It's just you have 2 freshmen starting, which I could live with if they weren't side by side. And then not only that, side by side on the back side of your entirely right-handed quarterback group.
Yes.
Those are sort of my concerns. And that is the biggest, to me, the biggest question mark about this football team is that. Now, maybe they're going to outperform us.
Sure.
And maybe they'll outperform us. I think you saw that most recent one.
Yes,
maybe they'll outperform the expectations of what you normally see from a freshman. But offensive line is not a position where we often see freshmen, especially multiple freshmen, coming in and playing on an elite offensive line.
Well, and the concerning thing for me is, and again, it's nothing against the 2 guys that they've got slated in there. It worries me about the guys that are now on the depth chart behind them, that they allowed, or that they, weren't as good as, or however you want to phrase it.
As much,
yeah. However you want to phrase it, that those guys were able to leapfrog the guys that were already there. That worries me. That does, because all those guys that they leapfrog were all highly touted guys coming in. And so,
because can we be honest about something, Vince? When freshmen start this early, it's not about coaching. It's about them being really talented.
Yes.
Right? It says more about the coaching that your other veteran players can get developed.
Yes. Thank you. That's
my concern.
I'm
my hope is that by the end of the game, we're like, no, they're just that good.
Right.
Right. And that could be it.
Sure.
I especially think that's true of Blake Fisher. I mean, that's the thing is we've been saying this since the beginning.
He's a grown man. He's a grown man coming in.
Former Notre Dame players that are now in the NFL or on the way to the NFL are coming back, watching practice, and coming and saying, boy, that kid's special.
Sure.
When that's happening, you're like, okay, yeah, there's something different about this kid. So it's just the 2 of them.
Right.
Both of them playing
and
inside.
Both on the left side. That's what I would spread them out. I really would. I would spread them out.
This is going to lead into our next question, Vince, and that is the position battles that we're most intrigued by.
Yes.
Going into the spring. So when you look at this game, we're talking specifically about the game. What are the positions you're going to be looking at and watching from how is this going to impact the depth chart moving forward? I think we just kind of talked about one.
We did, and I'll skip that one just because I did have that on my list.
And it was my number 1 as well.
Yeah, I had that on my list, but in order for us to talk about something different, I do have the wide receiver rotation. I want to see how deep they're going to go. And I realize they're going to have team, they're going to be split up. I get that. But if you want guys running with the ones, I want to see about 6 receivers with that one group. You know what I mean?
Right.
And I'm not worried about who's starting. And I think you had mentioned that earlier. I'm not worried about that. I want to see those guys getting opportunities. I want to see sub packages. I want to see the depth of the wide receiver position. And I want those guys to get touches. Right. So that is the position battle offensively that I'm going to be keeping an eye. Of course, I'm going to be watching for my boy George Takis, but
that's my number 3. We'll get there.
But I do want to see the depth at the wide receiver position and how they're using it.
I'm more concerned specifically about receiver for me is just the boundary position.
Okay.
And number one, who's lining up there? Is it going to be like it's been in the past where, like, okay, if you're the boundary, you're the boundary, and they're not going to move guys around? That's kind of back to my big picture things I'm looking for.
Sure.
But is there going to be a boundary receiver this year? Who is it going to be? Is Joe Wilkins going to step up and make plays?
Sure.
He, to me, seems like more of a complimentary player as opposed to the guy at W.
But a guy that should get time.
Right. Is Xavier Watts still going to be playing boundary? Are they going to be giving him an opportunity to go make plays? Who else lines up in that spot? Because right now, Kevin Austin is out. He's in that spot. Is Jordan Johnson going to be playing some boundary? Is he going to be more of a field guy? So those are the things that I look for when it comes to position battles. Because, look, Avery Davis is going to start in the slot. Braden Lindsey is going to play at the X. Lawrence Keys is going to get in some action. I think they'll have a little bit of interchangeableness there, but how is it going to look on the backside?
Yep.
That's the one for me. Because if the backside guy is not a playmaker, then I'm concerned. And here's the deal. You can't just assume Kevin Austin is going to be that guy when he gets back. Because, he's never proven he can stay healthy, and I hope he does. If Kevin Austin comes out and balls out this year, that's great for Notre Dame, and he's talented.
Absolutely.
But you can't assume that, okay, well, we don't have to worry about developing another guy there because we have Kevin Austin coming back. You can't do that. That would be foolish, and I don't think this staff is that foolish. I don't think they would make that mistake. So it is important that somebody steps up, because if Kevin Austin comes back and he's healthy and he goes for 100 yards against Florida State, 100 yards against Toledo, it's not guaranteed he's going to be out there for Purdue.
Yeah, right.
Especially with the type of injury that he has. That foot injury is really, really
broken it a couple different times. So
that concerns the heck out of me.
That's the concerning part. Absolutely.
So that's why boundary receivers have to step up. Who's going to be that guy, or 2 guys, hopefully, that steps up and says, hey, Kevin's coming back in the fall, but he's going to have to earn this spot. That's something I'm looking for. And what's your number 3 position, Vince?
You just had position battle, so I just picked 2. Those are the 2 that I'm really keeping an eye on. If I have to add a 3, it would be backup tight end. Just because
that's my 3rd,
just because I'm the president of the George Tech is backup tight end.
And it's a big part. I mean, look, there's no team in the country where that position is more important than Notre Dame,
because they go 2 and 3. I mean, they'll run with 2 tight ends for an entire series. So that second tight end is almost your 12th starter. So it is going to be a very important position for them to lock down and figure out how they're going to operate and who's going to be in that number 2 slot. So if I was going to pick a 3rd, that would absolutely be it.
Let's move to the freshmen, Vince.
Okay.
I'm going to cheat. We're going to go 3 freshmen they're going to watch, but I'm going to put 2 of these guys together, because in my defense, in this cheating, we always say that offensive line is kind of 1.
Okay.
All
right.
And since they're playing side by side, I'm kind of looking at Rocco Spindler and Blake Fisher as 1.
Well, I'm
hoping that emotion that you just had, that I had on the inside, and I think a lot of people are having, I hope that's completely gone by the end of the game.
I agree.
Because I'm looking to say, okay, are these guys just that good?
Right.
And when you look at Blake as an elite talent, Rocco has a father that played in the NFL. There's a case to say, well, maybe he's just more advanced than what you're used to. He's got that wrestling background. He was a really good high school wrestler. Though there's a lot, and he's a pretty athletic kid that played guard and tackle in high school. So it could be that they're just that good. And I'm hoping when I watch them that by the end of the spring, we're like, yeah, those guys are just that good. That's why they're starting on the offensive line.
Well, and here's my issue, and I don't want to go too far down the rabbit hole here. If they are that good, that's awesome.
Right.
I still worry about them being together just because of big game situations, communication, all those different things. Even if they're the best lineman I've ever seen, I would still split them up and I would put them next to a veteran. I just would. And that's what concerns me. And again, they might have the best blue gold game on the planet. They may come out just awesome. And then by the time they get to the big games, which, to be honest with you, I don't see a big game coming for quite a while on the schedule, they'll be ready to do that. And then maybe that is the case. I would personally, as a coach, I would feel more comfortable having a veteran by each one of those guys. That's me.
Florida State's not going to be that good this year, but that's still Florida State on the road.
And they can still do a lot of line games, and they're athletic as heck up front, and that could be dangerous.
Because I watched their blue gold game, and that was the one good thing about the rest of their defense is not good.
Yeah.
But their defensive line, they have a defensive end that transferred in from Georgia that's a really athletic kid that dominated in the blue gold game. But I think there could be some, look, I'm also curious to find out if this is not so much about this is where they want to play the freshmen long term, but more so let's just put these two kids side by side and see how they react.
See what happens.
And force them to have to get better at communicating. And then eventually when Jarrett Patterson comes back, we're going to move one to right guard and put Jarrett there or whatever the case may be. And then maybe put Jarrett at left tackle and you move Josh Lugg to guard and you put Blake Fisher at right tackle when you get to the fall. There's a lot of things that could happen.
Oh, absolutely.
And it could be just a situation where they're just like, look, we think these kids could be special. And in their defense, they could look at it and say, yeah, we think they're going to struggle a little bit in September. But we think by the end of the year, these kids are just so good that by the end of the year, they're going to be our best players. So we have to force the issue with them early.
Right.
What's a good way to force the issue? Put them on the left side, side by side, and say, sink or swim, kids.
I'm very interested to see what our conversation is like on September 2nd, which would be the Wednesday before the first game of the season. Well, in that neighborhood, it would be 3 days before. I'm interested to see what our conversation is. If we've had an opportunity to see some fall practice, and so on and so forth. So I obviously had both of those guys. They took up two of my slots because I didn't cheat. I'm a man of integrity. I'm a teacher, but they occupied spots 1 and 2 for me. So they were definitely on my list.
That's not going to go away, Vince. You think what I did to you before the last show was bad? Wait till you get payback on that one.
You are very good at getting me, by the way. I'm so gullible.
Yeah.
But my third one.
I'm also a good liar, which is not good. No, I'm just kidding. Lorenzo Styles is my number 2.
Okay.
Since I did cheat because I can. Lorenzo Styles is my number 2. I'm really looking forward to seeing what he does. We heard a lot about him in sort of the early portions of the winter, but we haven't seen much from him in the clips, and so it's not saying good or bad. We haven't seen much of him. Does he step up, make some plays? Is he a guy that could prove maybe if he's like, hey, look, we like him at receiver, but he's our 5th or 6th guy, but let's give him a chance to return some punts or something like that. I'm really looking forward to seeing what.
Which I'd be cool with. I'd be fine with that.
Yeah. Yep. So he's one for me, and then my third is Kane Barong. I'm looking forward to seeing what he can do. I think, and this ties into our earlier conversation about position battles. I think Kane Barong is going to have an opportunity to force his way onto the field next year, whether it's as the number 2 or the number 3.
Sure.
I'm really curious to see what he's going to do. What was your third, Vince?
Again, I went with the softball here, and I went with Tyler Buckner. We've seen the clips. I've seen the highlights. He hasn't played football in a really long time, and I don't necessarily like this analogy, but this will be the first opportunity he has to see the live bullets with fans in the stands and things of that nature. I want to see how he handles himself. I'm not looking for him to be the starter. That's not what I'm saying. I just want to see, because he'll be out there probably with the 2s, most likely. I want to see how he handles himself. I want to see – now, I wanted to see Phil Jakovic in a blue gold game and unleashed, but with the sack rules and stuff, we're probably not going to see Tyler Buckner's athletic ability.
My issue.
And that is disappointing, obviously. But I want to see him throw the ball. I want to see. I'm hoping they let him chuck it deep a little bit. I just want to see him. I want to see him play.
I want to see all the reactions about how Notre Dame needs to pull his scholarship after he doesn't go 17 of 20 for 295 yards. Right. Which seems to be the expectation with young quarterbacks. If he doesn't blow it up in his first ever spring game, he can't play, and he was a bust, and they should never have offered him a scholarship to begin with, because that's inevitably going to happen if he doesn't dominate. And then if he does dominate, then it's, Tyler Buckner should be the starting quarterback. So that's why I'm not looking forward to Tyler Buckner this spring. I think practically speaking as a coach, I think it's going to be a great opportunity for all the reasons that you just said. But I just know that no matter what he does, the fact is it's gonna be an overreaction in one way or the other.
Agreed.
To how he performs. Either he doesn't perform well and he's overrated and a bust. If he performs very well, he should be starting a quarterback. And to answer Connor's question, no, it will not. It's a blue gold game. I hate to break it to you.
It's still football though, Brian,
yes.
and we are deprived of Division I college football right now. Mm-hmm. I will take what I can get. And Connor's still in my Hall of Fame for comments, so I had to throw that up there.
Yeah.
So good stuff, my friend. Yes. So those are the three that I had. Mm-hmm. I had the two
three ideal takeaways. Vince, what do you hope that we're talking about when we come out of the spring game?
The first one would be the offensive philosophy, and not to beat a dead horse, but you and I have talked about this ad nauseum and what we want to see, and we think we have been seeing it, and I think we're going to get a good idea where this offense is at with the philosophy. Now, there's still going to be kinks to iron out. There's still going to be, and they're, of course, not going to show their whole hand and things like that. But I think we're going to get a pretty good idea of the corner that has been turned with this offense and what they want to do offense. I think we're going to have a good idea what that is, and I hope that is the first thing that we are talking about when we fire this up again on Monday.
I have the same one. So for the same reason, I mean, I don't think we're going to see all of it or even half of what they're going to do, but I think we're going to see enough to say it's going to kind of like whet the appetite. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Just give me a little taste.
Right. Yes.
Keep me happy for the next few months, right?
Yes.
Give me my little fix of you ran 7 RPOs. Okay, thanks, coach. I appreciate it. I can survive the next few months. So I have the same one. What's your number 2, Vince?
My number 2 was some stability on the offensive line, right? Mm-hmm. So, whether that's the freshmen playing out of their minds and playing really well and basically telling me to calm down, or, whether it's Zeke Correll at center or whatever the case may be, I want to see some stability. I want to see some guys, take control because they're the ones that are getting hammered on all these 3-minute clips by our counterparts at other places because, there's still guys that haven't even practiced sufficiently at the position that they should be competing at, right? So I am not as worried about it, but I want to see some guys take control.
Right. I want to see them battle.
That's where I'm at. Yeah.
That's me. I don't expect them to ball. I think if they ball out, that makes me concerned about the defensive line. For me, it's more about I just want to see them compete. I want to see them battle. I want to see them get after it. And just it's kind of like how I felt about the defensive line in 2017. I remember you and I talked at the time, and it was just like people were like, man, I'm really worried about this defensive line. And I'm like, I'm not. Do you see who they're going against every day? Like they're never going to face an offensive line that good the entire season.
Right.
And they didn't.
And I think that's going to be the case here, just the opposite. Right? I mean, this defensive line is going to be fantastic.
I don't think people realize how good this defensive line is going to be, especially up the middle.
Well, and with the linebacking core that's there filling and doing the things that they're going to be doing, I think it just makes it even better.
Vince, from the beginning of spring, we're seeing cornerbacks making plays off the – Marcus Freeman has not said, hey, let's give them 8 practices to get comfortable before we start throwing the kitchen sink at them. He said, hey, we're not worried about
the fire hose.
We're worried about us.
Let's go.
It's like ain't our fault that you guys are 4 new starters. We're going to get after it.
I love that.
And I like that. They've thrown a lot at them, and I want to see these guys finish the spring off in a good fashion. So you and I have the same number 2, and number 1 and number 2. What's your 3?
My third one, I actually wrote down Drew Pine with a question mark. And the reason being, I love Drew Pine, okay? We've seen what he can do kind of in practice and things of that nature, right, when he was the 3rd string. So, I mean, saw him in drills and things like that. I want to see, is he going to be a legit contender for the starting spot going into the fall? And if not, is he that solid number 2? Like that guy that, okay, if something happens to Jack Cohn, am I comfortable with Drew Pine stepping in the middle of the game in the 3rd quarter or whatever? Am I comfortable with him getting a start or 2? Is he going to be that solid number 2 guy that I've got no worries about? Because look, last year, I was worried about if something happened to Ian Book.
Yes.
As much as he ran around. It was just like, oh my absolutely. God. There was not that solid number. Look, would Drew Pine have been okay? Probably. But I didn't have that confidence. I just didn't. And so I'm hoping
the offense was conservative enough where they probably still could have won most of it.
You're right. But you see what I'm saying, right?
I 100% get what you're saying.
Yeah, that's where I'm at.
My 3rd was the playmakers. One of the things that we have said on this show for months is that Notre Dame has a lot more talent at wide receiver than people think, and at running back and tight end.
Absolutely.
Well, this is an opportunity for them to show that.
For
and
sure.
if they're out there dropping 9 balls and getting blanketed by the young corners, I'm like, well, scratch that. So that's what I'm hoping to take away is, man, this group has a lot of talent. This group, these guys actually can play, and there's a system in place that's going to play to their skills. So it ties into sort of the first one. But the scheme can only take you so far.
Correct.
You know, I've always said that it's not about the X's and O's, it's the Jimmies and Joes. And I've always said how I hate that expression. It's got to be both if you want to compete for a title.
I get that.
And so you talked about the X's and O's. Now I want to see the Jimmies and Joes step up and perform and say, yeah, okay, coach. I don't know. Yeah, I know you're a running team, but you need to get me the ball. You need to get me the ball more.
Right.
And that's something I want to see.
I think this offense is going to be fun to watch, even in the blue gold setting. I think that it's going to be – I think it's going to get some people excited about what this offense can potentially be. Right. I think it's going to lay the groundwork. It's going to lay the foundation. It's going to plant that seed. Any other cliche that you can come up with. That's what I think we're going to see. And that's what I hope to see. And I hope that's what we're talking about on Monday.
Now let's talk about the Notre Dame defense, Vince. This is the side of the ball that to me is the complete opposite of what we just talked about, in that there's not as many concerning questions.
Sure.
At least not as many across the board. There's some concerning questions. I guess it's almost like we're kind of taking this side of the ball for granted. And we've had a couple comments and questions here from people. Brian Chisanik says, I keep hearing from the national media that Notre Dame will take a step back in 2021. I think the D-line will elevate the defense and the offense will be more explosive. Should I tamper my expectations of 11-1? I have 2 bits of advice for Brian. Number 1 is stop listening to the national media.
They have no idea what they're talking about.
None.
Sorry. Because what they're doing is they're looking at how many guys from Notre Dame are in the NFL draft process right now, right? And how could they possibly bounce back after losing all of that talent, right? But they don't understand. They don't understand Marcus Freeman, number 1. Number 2, they don't understand the kind of talent that's been sitting on the bench at Notre Dame this whole time. And they don't understand the fact that Notre Dame is hopefully adjusting their offensive philosophy a little bit. So the national media, they just don't know enough. And it's not no knock against them. They have to know about 120 different teams, right? So I get it. But from a record standpoint, maybe they take a step back. Let's just say that they do.
Yeah, I mean, they may not go undefeated in the regular season.
Right. I'm still not impressed by this schedule, to be honest with you. This is a very, very workable schedule for Notre Dame. And they might, let's say they're not as strong of a team overall, they could still go undefeated, right? I'm not saying that that's what's going to happen. But if you tell me that Notre Dame goes 10-2, I'm going to have a hard time picking out which 2 games they're going to lose. For going into the game. Now, obviously, you see the game play out. You're like, okay, well, that's why. Or if there's injuries or whatever the case may be. But, man, I would have a hard time picking out which 2 games those are going to be. They should be favored in every game they go into this year. I'll just say that.
Yeah, name me the team that has a better roster than Notre Dame. And let's not forget, we saw the same thing in 2017. How's Notre Dame going to replace Mike McGlinchey and Quentin Nelson and Durham Smythe and, all these different players, that Josh Adams and all these different guys. And it's like, well, they went 12-0 the next year, and then 2011, it was how are they going to replace Harrison Smith and how are they going to replace Michael Floyd and Robert Blanton and Darius Fleming and Kerry Neal and Ian, all these guys. And then they went 12-0 the next year. I think what happens is the national media consistently underrates Notre Dame's talent. We saw it last year when everybody's shocked that Chase Claypool did as well as he did at the combine. And I'm like, well, did you not watch this film?
Right.
Because you shouldn't have been shocked if you watched this film. And I think defensively to me is where there's I think there's too much emphasis placed on recruiting rankings when it comes to projecting the next team, because they're not concerned about Alabama and Ohio State losing a ton of players because they rank in the top 3 in recruiting every year. Well, there's a reason that Notre Dame consistently finishes 10-2, 11-2, 12-1. the last 4 years, because they're recruiting guys like Isaiah Foskey, who may not be a highly ranked player, but you and I knew when we watched the film, this dude's a beast, right?
He'll be highly considered.
You and I see the film. Yeah, exactly. And so I also think, to your point, the schedule isn't, but I think the biggest thing for me is I have an expression that I've used, and I'm just really enjoying making up stuff as we go with expressions wise. But I say, look, it used to be defense wins championships, but now it's defense gets you to the show, and the offense has to win the championship. But the whole point about why I think Notre Dame is going to be better is because the defense is still going to be really good.
Sure.
The defense will still get you to the show. Now, whether or not you can compete when you get there is going to be determined by the offense. But
absolutely,
when I look at this Notre Dame football team, I say, and you compare it to, again, they don't play Ohio State in the regular season. They don't play Alabama in the regular season. They don't play Clemson in the regular season. They don't play Georgia in the regular season. All these teams, everybody's like, oh, these teams are so good. I saw one of these dudes from ESPN, which has just become embarrassing in its coverage of college football, to be honest with you. Some guy had Iowa State ranked 4th in the preseason poll. Name me a human being with any common sense that's going to say, yeah, I like Iowa State's roster better than Notre Dame's roster. Wow. I mean, it's just it's one of those F&P plus
and it's clickbait
nonsense.
stuff.
It is.
And
Notre Dame is, to me, should still once again be a top 10 team. They should still be minimum 10-2, which again is a top 10 team. And they are a team that should still, if they can catch a couple breaks, a couple guys develop, still have a shot to go into November as a team that is in contention for the college football playoff.
Absolutely.
Now, will they make it again? Don't know. I don't think the standard is it's a failure if they don't make the college football playoff. I'm not one of those people. It's is your program continue to improve, and are you then putting yourself in position that in 2022 you're able to then go make that run?
Is when the schedule is brutal. So
right.
there
needs
going
to be returning a lot of dudes. Exactly.
Of course. Yeah.
Exactly. So to my point to Brian is just don't worry about what the national media says. It's become less about analysis and more about, effect and clicks and those type of things. Should you tamper your expectation of 11-1? No. This is the 12th year of Brian Kelly's tenure.
No,
they have a lot of talent coming back. They've recruited very well in recent seasons. This roster is to the point where if they go less than 11-1, it needs to be because some team is way better than you thought, which could happen. That happens sometimes,
for sure.
And we may look at USC and be like, they're not, but then USC has this dream magical season, and all of a sudden, they're a wonderful team and they beat Notre Dame by a field goal or something like that. That could always happen. You could play a team in a horrible weather condition where it neutralizes this,
NC State a few years ago.
Right. Where it just completely neutralizes your talent advantage. There's all types of things that could happen. But to me, minimum 10-2. And if I'm saying minimum 10-2 to Brian's point, then you shouldn't tamper an 11-1 expectation because, again, that's the floor. Yeah. And a big reason for that is the defense.
Yep.
Because I'm very confident in the talent, the depth, and the coaching that Notre Dame is going to receive on defense. So to begin with that, Vince, what are the 3 big picture things you're looking for when you watch the game on Saturday?
These things, I guess, kind of bleed into each other, but I'm just excited to see this defense coached by a different person. And, whether that's Chris O'Leary, whether that's, Marcus Freeman, I just want to see the philosophy, right? I want to see the guys flying all over the field. And I realize this is more of a big picture than like a specific football thing, but I'm just excited to see, the play calls, the running around, allowing players to play and things of that nature that we've heard so much. I want to see it from an all-22 view, right? I want to see how the corner is filling for a linebacker. I want to, you know what I mean? Like some of those different things. I guess in a word, I want to see Freeman's defense. That's what I want to see. And I know that's real big picture, but that's where I'm at with number 1.
I went a little bit more narrow focused with it. And to me, the first thing I want to see is what do the coverage looks look like? Are they going to play as much man as we think? What's the man going to look like? There's a lot of different ways to play man coverage. You can play press. You can play off man. You can play press and then bail at the snap. You're still in man coverage. You can play off and then come up and reroute and open and run. Will they be pure man? Will they be half man, half zone? Those are the kind of things that I'm looking to see. Is I think the coverage structure is going to look a lot different this year. That's probably going to be the most noticeable change. And that, to me, is the first thing I'm looking at. A couple things real quick here, Vince. I've seen people ask about this. DBZ asked, what channel is the game on at what time? So DBZ, look, irishbreakdown.com tomorrow at 6 a.m. I have a story that's going to be published. It's going to have a link to all of our spring content, but it's also going to have the time, the date, and the channel. But I'm also going to put a link to the channel. So it's on Peacock, but you can get it for free. I'll have a link and then directions on how to get Peacock.
Look at you
when you click on that. So make sure you check that out tomorrow. But back to the thing. Number 2 for me, Vince, is again, you went kind of big picture. So this is part of my number 2. I want to see what the personnel packages look like.
Yeah.
Are they just going to be going from 4-2-5 to 3? There you go. To 3-3-5 with the same personnel?
Yes.
Are they going to do both of that? Will they also then mix up the personnel with different personnel to go into those different looks? Those are the things I'm looking to see.
Yeah, and I want to see them move in from a 3 front to a 4 front, and are they going to keep the defensive end, the Viper, in and put him at a linebacker? And what does the Rover look like? So yes, I had personnel packages basically for my number 2 as well. I want to see how multiple they can be with the same personnel. That's going to be fun to watch.
And my third is the pressures. I want to see what kind of pressure packages he brings. We may not see. It's kind of like offense. We may not see a whole lot in this game, and if we don't, I'm not going to be stressed about it because we've seen some stuff in practice that makes you think they're going to be aggressive. They may not show it in the game, but if they do, I would like to see kind of what those look like.
Yeah, my final one was linebacker play. I want to see, number 1, who's lining up where. Are they taking linebackers off the field? Like I said, again, it's kind of personnel-ish and package-ish, right? So they kind of all go together. But I had written down linebacker play. I'm very interested to see, are we going to see Drew White and Bauer out there together? That intrigues me to no end.
I'm curious if we're even going to see Drew White because he's been banged up so much.
Yeah.
Brian Kelly had made a comment that they're probably going to protect him and play it safe with him because they already know what Drew can do.
Sure.
So there's a chance we may not even see Drew White. But if he does play, to your point, I would like to see them do that. Before we move on to the next one, Jacob was with us the last show. Thanks so much for the daily content and making my days much better, man. Jacob, I can't tell you how much that means, man, because we put in a lot of hours. Vince is teaching and coaching, and he has 5 kids, and he takes breaks to do these shows. We love to do it, but it is a lot of work. And when we know that it's being watched and it's making an impact and people are enjoying it, that's why Vince is so moved by Connor's comments, because Vince can relate to that a lot more than I can because we don't have kids. If my kids are getting annoying, I just let them outside to go to the bathroom or give them a bone to chew on for a little while because my kids have 4 legs. Well, one has 3 legs, but the other one has 4 legs.
That's true, but that's the one my daughter loves the most.
She does. But yeah, we really appreciate that. And then of course, you're giving your hard-earned money to us to help support our channel.
Yeah, no doubt.
Sure, humbled and greatly appreciate it. But we do have more football to talk about.
We do.
3 players on defense, and I have a feeling you and I are going to be on the same page here. We did not talk about the 3.
We didn't get to the defensive side. Yeah.
What are the 3 players you are most looking forward to watching on defense?
Number 1 is number 7. Isaiah
number
Foskey.
1.
Yeah, I want to see him really take control of the starting position, right? He's been kind of a spot player, made an impact, no question, right? But sometimes guys, and I'm not saying this is going to be the case with him, I'm saying in general, sometimes when now the pressure's on them to be the starter and be the guy, sometimes they can't step up, right? And I'm not saying we're going to get all those questions answered, but I love the fact that he's going to be on the field more often. I'm excited to see the impact that he has as a starter. So he's my number 1.
One of the questions we got during the show, Vince, is from P-Dub. Is the defensive line that good or is the offensive line that bad? We're going to kind of get a sense of that, but to me, I think it's more about the defensive line being that good, and I think that Foskey's going to be a big part of whether or not that goes into the fall. Whether that continues against maybe more experienced teams, and when you get to when it really matters. Foskey has to step up and be the guy. He doesn't have to be like the 13-sack first-round draft pick this year.
Sure. But
he needs to at least have a Julian Okwara-esque, the 2018 season that Julian Okwara had. He needs to have, 12 TFLs, 7-8 sacks, just be a good pressure guy, be disruptive. That we need to see from him this spring. And so that's why he's number 1 on my list. And your number 2 is?
You know what? I have Beau Bauer here. I'm excited.
We don't have the same 3. Interesting.
I am excited to see, especially with Drew White potentially being on the shelf for the spring game, which I don't blame Brian Kelly for in any way. He started, what he brings to the table. I want to see Beau Bauer with the opportunity to be the guy in the middle for an entire game. I want to see what he can do. I'm a big fan of his, and I want to see, especially in this kind of a defense where they're going to let him potentially blitz and kind of move around and all those different things. I want to see what 52 can do. I'm excited.
Well, one of the questions we got from Saul and Rogers was, is there any way Drew White does not start in the fall? Well,
sure,
yeah,
there's a way.
Beau Bauer dominates. And I've heard that Beau Bauer's had a great spring. And if and again, this is a situation where you have a first-time coordinator.
Right.
He's gonna play the guys that he thinks is best.
I mean, he's gonna watch film from before, of course. Yeah. But he has made a point, and he said it in his press conference. When he was talking about Houston Griffith, he said, "Look, my evaluation starts when I walk on the field." Yeah. Right? He goes, and with you guys.
He said that to Tariq Bracy.
Was it Bracy? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I remember him saying it in a press conference. He's like,
but it applies to everybody.
It applies to everybody. That's exactly right. He wants to see what guys can do in front of him, And so, yeah, there's absolutely a chance that could happen.
I'd be shocked if Drew White's not starting game one. But to your point, I could see if Beau Bauer continues to play well this spring, that eventually that Bauer's snaps become a little bit more than Drew White snaps by the end of the year. I could see that. My number 2 is Houston Griffith. I think he is one of the keys to the defense. He has to play well. To play well. And I'm curious to see how he's going to do, because he's kind of had to take a leadership role in the secondary this spring because there's no Kyle Hamilton.
Hamilton's not there. I mean, he's there, but he's not there, right?
And I'm curious to see how he does. Now, in the few clips we've seen him, I thought he's looked good. Even the 1 or 2 times he's gotten beat, he was in great position. It just required a great ball and a great catch, which is going to happen.
Right.
So I want to see him. And if we don't have the same number 3, I'm gonna be completely shocked.
Well, I had Houston Griffith as my number 3.
So you've given up on Cam Hart? You're no longer on a Cam Hart bandwagon? Is that where we're at now, Vince?
No, I am also the president of his fan club as well.
Well, where's the love?
Look, my confidence level is so high. He didn't even make my list.
We're now at crunch time. We're getting ready to preview the Blue-Gold game, and you have no Cam Hart mentions. I'm just saying, you have lost your fan club presidency status. You've been demoted.
You're not wrong. That's fair. That is fair. He didn't spring to mind, which I don't know what that says. I think I'm going to need to lay down on a couch and have a conversation with somebody. But,
yep.
No, I agree with you, though.
Number 3. Cam's my number 3.
I agree with you so much.
That's why 2 of the 3 guys on my list were secondary guys. Because to your point about Beau Bauer, Beau's a really good player. I could see him playing. But if he doesn't, they're going to be fine because Drew White can play.
Absolutely.
The reason Griffith and Hart are at the top of my the number 2 and 3 on my list is because they both need in an ideal world for Notre Dame, they both step up and play well. They are keys to the secondary becoming good enough. Because here's the deal. As good as the defensive line is, it can get you to the show. But for them to take that next step, and this is something we talked about in a recent show, Vince, they have to be able to dominate in those big games.
Right.
But dominating against those good teams doesn't look like it does when you're playing Purdue or Florida State.
Right.
And we saw this in 2018 against Clemson. The defensive line whooped Clemson's butt all game long. There was about 5 or 6 plays where they didn't get pressure, and on those 5 or 6 plays, Trevor Lawrence shredded the secondary.
Made plays.
And so no matter how good the defensive line is, to win on the big stage, your secondary has to perform well. And to me, Houston and Cam Hart are 2 very, very important parts of that. Whether it's the starters or in Cam, and Houston needs to be a starter, but in Cam's situation, whether it's a starter on the boundary, whether it's in the nickel, whether it's part of a rotation,
he needs to be involved.
They need Cam Hart to step up and play well, and I want to see how he performs against what I believe to be a pretty good wide receiver core. So that's why
I like it.
Position battles. There's only 2 for me. I couldn't really go much further than 2, and the reason for that is, Vince, is because I look at the defensive line, and it's I don't think it matters who starts.
I'm with you there.
There's a bunch of dudes going to play.
Definitely didn't have that.
I only had 2 positions that I really had written down as position battles. What was your first one?
Well, I guess you could call this 2, but I had either corner spot because I don't think anything's a given at either corner spot going into the spring, especially with Marcus Freeman coming in, and especially with Tariq Bracy and the issues that he had at the end of last year. Clarence Lewis was a true freshman. I mean, played well for a true freshman, but again, there's nothing guaranteed. So it was the cornerback positions. Okay, who's going to step up? Are they going to use a corner in the nickel? So really, that whole cornerback room Who's going to step up? Who's going to start? So that was my first one for sure.
I went there too. I want to see what, right now I look at it and say it's a Clarence Lewis, Cam Hart, and then Tariq Bracy is kind of the three guys that will play.
Yep.
What's that going to look like? Is Lewis starting and Tariq Bracy plays in the nickel or plays in the rotation? Is Cam, or is Cam Hart starting, or maybe they move Clarence Lewis to the boundary because Cam Hart's not ready to be the guy and Tariq's playing great. There's so many question marks about it, but I want to see who steps up. And then is the hype about some of the younger guys that Brian Kelly brought up real? I have, again, this is where you got to be careful looking too much in the videos, because when I watch the videos, I see Ramon Henderson getting beat a lot.
Yeah,
but that could just be coincidence of the videos,
because
he could also be
offense.
Dominating.
Yeah.
We've seen maybe 10, 12, 15 clips of him this spring. He's had hundreds of snaps this spring. Right. So it's just not indicative. And so you can't really make those conclusions. Brian Kelly raved about him, but is that real or not? We're going to see first chance to really see Ramon on Saturday. So, is that a real battle, or is it Cam Hart by default? If Cam Hart wins the job, I want it to be because he's that good, not because, who else are you going to play?
Right.
And that's where I get a little bit concerned. Yes, this Connor, I love you, man. Down with ESPN, support independent media. Preach. And we appreciate your support, my man.
Yeah, no
very,
doubt.
very much.
I told you, he's in my Hall of Fame for comments.
Yeah.
I love that guy so much.
Yeah. So the other one for me is Will Linebacker. And
really?
It's
Okay.
It's not so much a position battle in that one guy's going to play over the other. It's who's going to start, and then is one guy going to be kind of the starter, and then the other guy is used as sort of like a role player, a niche player. Because one of the questions that we got up here was from John A1, how good will Shane Simon be in 2021? I think that's a big one, because if Shane Simon just locks down the Will linebacker spot, it's because he had a great spring.
Yeah.
So that's kind of partly why I want to see, is this a real battle? Is Shane locked it down, or is Mayer still pushing? Because the answer to that is going to tell us just how good that Will linebacker position is going to be. In a perfect world, Shane locks down the base defense Will linebacker job, and he can play all three downs. That then frees you up to use Maris as sort of like a missile.
Yeah.
When Maris is in the game, he's going to attack.
He's coming.
And you can be more of a niche player.
Sure.
That to me is the ideal situation for me. And then maybe some times when we always talk about, putting Drew White and Beau Bauer on the field together. Well, what about some scenarios where you want to get a little bit more athletic and you put Shane Simon and Maris Lewis on the field together?
Absolutely. That's
something I'm curious to see more of this spring. But that only happens if those two guys step up. So that was the other one for me that was an intriguing position battle.
Well, and, I had a tough time coming up with a second one, to be honest with you, because cornerback has kind of occupied my brain trust for a while.
Mm-hmm.
I did put Rover there just because, I want to see Jack Kaiser just ball out. You know what I mean? Just and look, I love the local kid from Penn.
But he's not really injured. He hasn't played in this spring.
And he's injured, and
so it's not a position battle yet.
Exactly. He's not going to have an opportunity to really battle for that.
So you just went. So basically, Vince, you went boundary corner, field corner, nickel corner is kind of your three position battle. Fair enough.
Pretty much. Because those, and the other reason is, and we've talked about this too, those positions are so important in Marcus Freeman's defense, because he's going to put those guys on an island. And so they need to be able, if they can't do it, he's going to come up with ways to protect them.
Yeah.
But in order for his defense to be what it needs to be, he's got to trust those guys, And so those are really huge positions right now. So it's definitely preoccupied.
This is a little bit off topic, Vince, but it's kind of relevant to my Will linebacker conversation.
Oh yeah, I see that.
Could you imagine?
Nope.
Jalen Smith playing his defense? Oh my Lord.
No.
That would be scary. That would be
unbelievable.
Very, very scary to see him playing it. Yeah, he would be a beast. And I think Manti'd be a beast in this defense too.
Yeah.
And I'm going to do an article this summer about why there's the need for a thumping middle linebacker is coming back. And I believe it's coming back. And I'm going to have an article about that this summer. But in the era of RPOs, I think it's important to have a thumper middle linebacker. But I'd love. But Jalen would just be. He'd be. The only person that could ever slow down Jalen Smith was Brian Van Gorder.
Yeah,
that's the only person ever that could tamp down his production ever. Freshman to watch, Vince. Freshman to watch. Who's your first freshman to watch?
Again,
keeping in mind that Gabriel Rubio's probably not going to play because he has an arm injury.
Yeah, I had two. I had Ryan Barnes and and Riley because they're competing at the cornerback spot, right?
You said Ryan Barnes and Philip Riley?
Philip Riley, yeah.
Okay.
Yep. I had those two just because of what is going on at the cornerback position. Those are the two. I'm hoping that they get a legit opportunity to go out. And again, they're true freshmen. I'm not expecting miracles here, but I want to see 25 and 15, see what they can get done, see what they can accomplish out there. And it'll probably be against, the number 2 wide receivers or whatever, but that's fine. But I want to see how they're progressing and how they're doing.
Could end up being against the number 1s if they do what Kelly kind of talked about, which is very well 1s versus 2s and that kind of thing. But yeah, they were my 1 and 2, Barnes and Riley. I just want to see how they're progressing. Yeah. My expectation for them was they would make some noise this spring, and then that would then spring them into the offseason where they would then make a jump and then battle in the fall. My third is Justin Walters. He has flashed in some of those clips.
Safety, right?
A little bit further along than I thought, because he didn't play as a senior because of Illinois canceling football. He's number 20, and he has performed well to the point where he could be pushing for a role in that secondary by the time we get to the fall. Now, right now, I still think he's probably too far behind scheme-wise and all those kind of things, but that's not what the spring is for freshmen on defense. It's about make some noise, learn the defense, but then when you get that under your belt, then you can go into the fall and you've got those 25-plus practices to really focus on battling. So the three – and look, there's a theme here that we've kind of covered. There's a lot of secondary conversation in this defensive breakdown because that's the one position to me that is the most problematic. Now, it's not going to hurt them against most of their opponents. But look, the way that USC runs their offense, it's hard for your defensive line to impact the game the way it will against a North Carolina who runs the ball so much.
Because they get the ball out so fast.
And they throw a ton. It's it's almost like 7-on-7 football to a degree.
Right. It is. You're right.
So you got to have guys who can cover when you're playing USC. And I know they lost Tyler Vaughns and Amon-Ra St. Brown, but trust me, USC is not going to be devoid of talented receiver.
Because they're all in their backyard. Right. I mean, they can recruit LA. Right. You know what I'm saying. But they're going to have guys. They're going to have athletes.
Right. No North Carolina is going to have guys can spread the field. And then bigger picture, if you are able to go 11-1, 12-0 because your schedule's not great or you're just that good, you play Alabama, you play Clemson, you play Oklahoma or Ohio State in the playoff, you're going to have to be able to cover. And we talked about this for the same reasons we discussed earlier. Look at the 2018 game. At some point in time, there's going to be plays where you have to be able to cover, and that leads to this question from Joe. If you get to the Final Four, can Notre Dame play with the big boy football and actually be in the game and play with the other powers of the CFB? There's two things that are going to factor into that. One, does the secondary make the jump that we hope it can make? And then number 2, it's offense. Can the offense score?
Can they
front
score?
7-wise, Vince, I'm not at all concerned about the front 7.
I agree.
I think Notre Dame has arguably the best safety in the entire country. But what do those other 3 to 4 secondary positions look like? That's the bigger question for me.
Yep. Completely agree.
Now, final 3 takeaways. What are the 3 things that you hope that we're talking about with the defense when we come out of the spring?
Well, I hope we're talking about how impressed we are with the depth defensively. And I know, we know what the defensive line is bringing to the table. We know what linebackers are involved, and I think there's depth there, to be honest with you. So I think we'll be talking about that. Again, it goes to the secondary, I'm hoping that those 2 freshmen we talked about, Riley and Barnes, that they're stepping up, and that we got some quality depth at corner, I'm hoping that Walter steps up and you could say, okay, we've got some quality depth at safety, right? I hope we're talking about depth across the board on the defensive side of the ball, because that's going to make them that much more dangerous as we move forward in the season.
My number 1 is the defensive line as good as advertised? That's the one for me.
Do you think we're going to be able to figure that out, though, in this game?
Yeah, because I think you can evaluate a player's production independent or their performance independent of the production. So if they're out there making a ton of plays, you can still tell whether Jason Ademilola is quick off the ball. You can still tell if Isaiah Foskey's enhanced his pass rush moves. You can still tell if Myron Tungavaloa is comfortable playing the defensive end, if Justin Ademilola has improved his game, if Riley Mills has made the necessary physical jumps that he needs to make, showing off the athleticism and those types of things. So, yeah, I think we still can learn for the same reasons when you watch a kid playing in a high school film and you know he's better than everybody on the field, you can still evaluate what's his explosiveness like, what's his agility, what's his footwork, does he have loose hips, what is his technique, those types of things. So I still think there's plenty to learn. But again, if they don't dominate this game, that could be a thing where, okay, was it because they tamped down the pressures, they didn't turn them loose, or is it because maybe they're not as good as we're thinking, and it's just been more about the highlights have just been that good, and they're really they only make 9 good plays a practice, and they just happen to be all in the highlights. We're going to find out. And then number 2, Vince, we're on the same page here. I know we talked about this one, and that's certainty in the secondary. I hope that we're saying, boy, Cam played well, and the freshmen have promise, and DJ Brown's solid. Houston stepped up and balled out. Tariq's back to his old ways. He's Clarence Lewis. I hope all those things that we're hoping for in the secondary are what we see, and we're feeling good about it heading into the spring or heading into the summer. And
that's my number 2 as well. I mean, that was it. I put cornerback stability. Are we going to get kind of an idea of where things are? Get a pecking order. More so defined than what we think it is going in. And I stopped at number 2. I mean, those are the 2 things that I'm really going to I want to be taken away from this game. I mean, I feel like I've got all the other answers.
Yeah. So. And back to what John said, kind of the point number 1 is, in 2021 is the defensive line now the strength of the football team. I think it has a shot to be. And I think we need to be talking about that being true coming out of spring game. When you look at the talent at tight end and running back and linebacker and receiver, quarterback, there's a lot of really talented positions. Through all of that, we're talking about the defensive line is the strength of this football team, then I'm going to feel really good, because to me, a great defensive line is like a great offensive line. It can erase a lot of your other warts.
Sure.
If it's dominating, okay, you could have maybe completed more balls on the secondary, but you never had time because the defense dominated you. And that to me is one of those keys. But at the same time, Vince, I need to see that the linebackers have improved. I do think that's important.
Yeah.
I do. No matter how good the defensive line is, again, because if the standard is winning a championship, look at the 2012 game, against Alabama. I thought the defensive line held their own that game, but the linebackers and safeties played terrible in that game. So how many times did they miss, one of the 2 running backs, whether it's either Lacey or the other, I can't remember the other big kid's name that they had. How many times did Zeke Motto or Manti miss those guys at the line of scrimmage?
Right.
Well, they were meeting them at the line of scrimmage because the defensive line had done their job.
Correct.
So when we're talking championship, we still need to see that the linebackers are able to make plays. And I think this is a defense that we talked about from day one. This is a linebacker-driven defense. And Marcus Freeman said it's driven by the defensive line, and I get what he's saying, and I don't disagree with it. But at the end of the day, and to win the like Joe mentioned, can they win on the big stage? The linebackers have to be better than they were last year. In an era of RPOs and teams spreading the field and all that kind of stuff, if you don't have great linebacker play,
you can't get sucked in, and you can't bite on certain things. You got to.
You have to make plays in space. You have to be able to make plays in the backfield. All those things are super important. So, and that is going to do it for today's show. Now, today is Wednesday. Tomorrow we'll have some preview stuff on the website about the Blue-Gold game. Friday, as I said, we will have an article in the morning that has when the game is, what channel, what time. I will have a link to the Peacock Network, which is where the game is being played. So that'll be in there as well. We will have instructions on how to sign up, because it is free. You do not have to. You do not have to buy the Peacock Network. If you are an Xfinity or Cox customer, you may not know this yet, but you already get premium access to Peacock if you just sign in Peacock with that account. So those are just some things that we'll have for you on Friday. We'll also have a sort of a written what to look for in written form for that game as well. We'll have a lot for that. Saturday, we will have a game day chat that we'll have at irishbreakdown.com. So make sure that you're signed up for the website, but through Discuss, because we'll have that forum. I'll have live updates. We'll have our game observations. I'll have that article after the game like we normally do on game day. And then when I get home from the game, we'll fire up the live stream and we'll talk about the game. I'll give my impressions. I want to hear all of your impressions. I want to hear comments, thoughts, questions, whatever the case may be. And we'll go there. So, Joe, just to answer that question, you can always do a super chat during the show. You can also sign up for a membership to irishbreakdown.com. I'm not really pushing the membership forum right now because we don't have a message board yet. And I want to wait till our message board is going on that. But you can always sign up. IrishBreakdown.com.
Super chat would be the easiest way, I would say.
And that is $5.99 a month or $59.99 a year, and you also get access to you get the Sports Illustrated, the magazine will be as part of that subscription as well. But I just haven't promoted that yet. You can find a link. I know you can find a link to the bottom of all of my articles if you want to do that. So.
Absolutely.
And Omar nailed it correctly. It's really not a game week without an Irish Breakdown preview. And I think he is 100% correct. And Omar, we always appreciate you being in the show, my man. Really appreciate that very much. But
Con's been awesome today, by the way.
Yeah.
I've really enjoyed watching some of the banter back and forth and some of that. It's been good stuff today. So thanks, guys.
D-Rock, obviously, hit the like button and subscribe, hit the notification bell. And we actually had a question kind of come up here as we were getting ready to bow out of here. It's crazy how little Avery Davis comes to mind. Is it because we know what we get with him? I think
there's another level for Avery
Davis. I talk a lot about Avery Davis.
Yeah, I love him. I think that from what he's had to endure at Notre Dame, just from all the position changes and things like that, there is absolutely no reason he should still be here, other than the fact he wanted to make sure he got his degree.
And he's a competitor.
And he's a competitor, man.
It's just not the great story, though, Vince. I think this kid's a playmaker, and I think people are sleeping on him.
Yes.
And look, maybe, and that's, I mean, we kind of did too when we talked about the guys we're looking forward to seeing. To me, I think there's two reasons people don't talk about him. Number one is because he has played, and it's not one of these guys that, we don't know what Lawrence Keys can do, or we don't know what Braden Lindsey can do. And I think the other reason is because there's an expectation, and I know people that feel this way. Well, he is what he is. What we saw last year, that's just who he is.
Right.
I don't think that's true.
I agree.
I think there's a lot of room for Avery Davis to become a bigger playmaker if they're going to use him correctly. And so, but for me, it's more of, I just kind of take him for granted. I just assume he's going to make that jump and be a big time playmaker. So maybe that's my fault that we don't talk about him enough, and we didn't in the show, but I've written a little bit about him. We've talked about him in past podcasts, Sean, where I think Avery Davis is going to be an NFL football player. I'm not saying he's going to be a first round draft pick, but I think if he tests the way I think he's going to test next year, he's going to be drafted somewhere in the middle late rounds and be a really productive player. So, Vince, you're scouring through the comments. Do you see anything else that we need to? I
don't think so.
Get to?
I don't think so.
Well, we'll be back again on Friday. So we will have our Friday free for all podcast, which will be just Q&A. So we'll be ready to go. These last couple shows during the week are more about us kind of just doing our normal podcast, and then if there are questions, we'll sprinkle them in. The Friday free for all is going to be our traditional. You show up, you guys drive the content, you drive the discussion, you ask us the things that you're curious about. We could, I was thought about making it kind of specific to the Blue-Gold game, but forget it. It's going to be a Friday free for all.
Yeah,
we're going to talk about whatever y'all want to talk about. Notre Dame football related, college football related, recruiting related, whatever the case may be. So, Vince, I think somebody asked you earlier too how your baseball season's going, so maybe we can dive into that next time too.
Yeah, that sounds good.
But that, let's maybe wait for that until after the doubleheader, because I think how the doubleheader goes could change Vince's mind about how the baseball season is going. So, and then Bobby, yes, it will be at 1 o'clock on Friday, 1 p.m. Eastern. We'll start right around then. Vince will obviously be there for the first hour, and then he's got to get back to his duties. Fortunately for me, this is my full-time job, so I can stay the entire time. Last week, Vince, we went 2.5 hours, and there were still questions that I couldn't get to.
Crazy.
Just didn't have time to get to them. So it's so awesome, the community that we're building here. So we appreciate you all being part of it. For Vince D'Addario, I'm Brian Driscoll. Thanks so much for joining us, and we will talk to you all again very, very soon.